This is Melissa Lane, and you're listening to the LifeKraft Podcast, where we will be bringing you new insights, awareness, and tools to create a fulfilling life. On today's episode of the LifeKraft Podcast, we have the extraordinary Janie Bay. Janie is a musician, singer, and songwriter from South Africa who has captivated the hearts of audiences worldwide with her beautiful voice and her heartfelt songs. In today's episode, we talk about her life growing up, struggles she faced with her weight and body image as a young girl, the importance of being disciplined, relationships, divorce, her music career, pivoting, and so much more. Are you ready to be inspired? Tag at the LifeKraft and at Janie Bay and share a screenshot on your stories with us of your biggest takeaway from this episode. Janie, welcome to the LifeKraft Podcast. I'm so happy to have you on the show today and for our audience to get to know you and your story. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
You are in Somerset West at the moment, and I thought you could just tell our audience a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and a little of your backstory.
Yeah, so I grew up in Strand. I was born in Paarl. I didn't live there for very long. I think it was about 2 years as a baby. Most of my young years until I think about 18 years old. I grew up in Strand. Yeah, so that was pretty much my younger life was started this side.
Yeah. How was it growing up there? Any defining moments in your childhood, especially being a little muso? Were you always inspired by music? Did you always want to be a singer and a songwriter? Or did it kind of did you grow into that naturally?
My dad, in school, he played trumpet really well. He also sang, he played drums. And then my mom, also, she sang really well. She was also in the I Said Fit competitions. She did well there. She played piano, she played guitar. So they were very musical, and a lot of it was self-taught. Music was always part of my life. When I was very small, my dad used to film us. When my brother, he's 2 years older than me, when he was in his nursery school play, then I used to I climbed onto the stage after everything was done and all the parents were mingling and then I was standing there and singing and doing my thing. So it was always there. Yeah, in school, I think a part of me, I don't know that I was shy. Maybe I was more reserved. Maybe I didn't believe in myself so much at the time. I think that maybe also came from I was very overweight when I was small. Although the nice thing is that my mom always told me that I'm beautiful, inside and out, and that helped. That kind of it didn't get to a point where it was at the time when I really was troubled in that sense. I always this is say pre-teens. This is just how it is kind of thing.
And then let's get into the teens, because it's interesting to hear you talk about that. You definitely define that. And I know I also grew up struggling with my weight, struggling with disordered eating, struggling with the whole diet culture thing, and just going through your teens as a woman with all of that pressure and all of those demands on you. So it can get to you. And especially when you go into your teenage years, the older I got, the more there was definitely also a defining moment in my life from preteen to teens. And the teens was quite rough. So tell us about your teenage years.
In my life, there was a moment where it's almost like you finally see and realize that you are now in the real world. When I was about 10 years old, what I remember is I had two single beds in my room. And my room and my brother's room, it was right next to each other. And so I was sitting on the one, facing him, and he was sitting on the other one. And he was just kind of sitting there, looking at me and looking down. And I heard my dad and my mom. My dad was shouting, and I heard him swearing at her. And I definitely realized something is not right. And that was kind of a moment where okay, real life. I don't know. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like
absolutely.
Now that innocence is kind of taken away, I had, my morals was good. And I think my mom had a lot to do with that, even in my teens. But maybe that year, the year after that, maybe turning about 12, 13, is when I realized that my dad drinks a lot. Yeah, so that was like obviously something that was strange for me and hard at times, because when you're so young, when you have friends over, and certainly when I was about 12, 13 or so, with my dad like walking around there, he wasn't abusive like physically or anything like that. He was quite on his own, wanting to just sit there and do his thing. But it was sometimes hard, him like walking around there and falling around and like not wanting my friends to see that, and becoming a teenager. I was like a tomboy. I kind of became that tomboy vibe because I knew that I was overweight. I think because of that, my mind, I don't know how it happened, but I think my mind just went, okay, well, this is what I look like. If I can hide it, and I can like be like a tomboyish, does the feminine side of it just didn't really seem right, or it's not going to do much for me. So I'll just be one of the guys. And my mom was always very loving, and she was there, and she tried to keep the bad stuff away from us, but it wasn't obviously always possible. We had this tall cupboard with chips and chocolates and cookies and all sorts of things, and it was just too easy accessible for us. Like we could, like, we probably had like a chocolate every day. Well, if I think back now to my friends at the time, that wasn't normal. Like they maybe had a chocolate a week as a treat. I didn't like, so it was just too much. But for my mom, it was just like, oh, but it's fine. She didn't realize. So yeah, so when I was 15, like that skinny model thing was so in at the time.
It's such a pressure, and I don't think people talk about it enough. And there's such a generation with a lot of disordered eating, a very wrong perception about what a body should look like just because of the 90s, like late 80s, early 90s. It was mind blowing. Yeah, it really was, because it was so much pressure. How did you deal with that? When did you realize? When you were about 15?
Yeah, so I was 15 when I said when I really realized, okay, my body is actually bigger than my friends. Before it was like, oh, I know it, but it's like, okay, so what? But then it was like, okay, I need to make a change because I'm not eating healthy. So that's obviously bad. I just genuinely wanted to lose the weight. It wasn't a mind thing where it was problematic. It was literally just, please help me. Can we make the healthier food for me? Can we look into it and learn and see what we can do? Okay, so my mom was very good with that. We didn't know that much yet, but we obviously tried to look at what would be better foods to eat. So you can imagine 15, 16 years old is super weird to live like this.
Yeah.
My friends that were still there, they would eat whatever. And I'm sitting with a carrot. But but it's on the other end, it was the best thing that younger Janie could do, because it is a very good time to learn discipline at 15, 16. You wouldn't think it's not a normal thing to do, but it was so good that I decided that on my own to actually do that, because that part, that really set me up for a lot of self-motivation, self-discipline, and to keep moving and to keep motivating myself for all sorts of things in my life going forward. So I'm super thankful for little me, if I look back, of a good decision back then. So I started just walking 30 minutes a day, just in my neighborhood, try and walk and power walk. So I can tell you then, when I started, my weight was at a 76. Knowing now what I kind of weigh, that was a lot for my frame back then. So it was tough in the beginning. Obviously, just walking for 30 minutes was and but I did that for a few months, and I probably lost about 10 kilograms. And And so I lost a bit more weight and I started gymming, and I was 16. So I could actually go to the gym because you had to be 16 to gym on your own. And then I carried on for another year doing that. And in the end, I lost 20 kilograms. So that was within a year and a half. When I was 16, I met my boyfriend who became my husband, but we're not together anymore. But at the time, that's when I met him and we were together. You know, it was still like my life at home with my mom and my dad. And, you know, things were obviously getting worse there. And when I was 19, I didn't finish school. I think a lot of with my dad's drinking, that he lost his job. And I started working when I was 16, just like odd jobs. I was mostly working in retail in clothing shops. My brother had to work and we had to like try and bring some money in. And then my dad lost his job. My mom and dad finally split up. Yeah, I was 19 at the time. And then my boyfriend then at the time, things weren't so lacquer then. I also had one or two strange job things. And at 19, it's just a strange age. And so my boyfriend and I split up at the time, and it was just obviously a lot of things at once. So that's when this whole thing came in, into my mind, that I didn't feel like eating. So I think there was a bit of a depression on that side. I exercised so much and I think at the time, maybe I had like a little cup of Rice Krispies in the morning and a banana and half a can of tuna. That's probably for like 8 months. That was probably what I ate. Yeah. I lost a lot of weight. I think for me, I went down to about 48, and that's ridiculous. I've got quite big eyes, and that was like, it looked very strange with that amount of weight loss. I didn't feel good about myself. You're like, obviously, every time you see yourself in the mirror, you're like, oh, I can fit into anything. But there's a side of that that's also just mentally, it's because you can never actually get there. It's like the whole time, no, but what about this and that? And I just didn't feel good about life and myself, and felt like a lot of things were going wrong. And once again, at that age, it's just like, don't know what to do.
And it's strange, because not a lot of people talk about the fact that we see someone losing so much weight, but we never talk about the backstory. It's not always a positive thing. It's not always for healthy reasons. It's not always an accomplishment. A lot of times when people lose weight, especially that suddenly, and you see them deteriorating, it's like they're becoming smaller, not becoming fitter and healthier, but making themselves smaller and smaller. And we compliment them and they get more attention and things. They don't realize we still look in the mirror and it's still not enough. It's actually because we have no desire to eat, because we're so stressed and life is just getting us down, and we have no appetite. Like, you don't have an appetite for life, so you don't have an appetite for anything. So we kind of glamorize weight loss, and it's not always this amazing thing, because sometimes you're struggling, you're suffering, you are dealing with depression, you're dealing with all of those things. And it's kind of just you fading away. It's not an accomplishment.
And it's also interesting, you're saying now fading away and you make yourself smaller. That self-destructive thing is like almost you want to fade away. You want to make yourself smaller because you feel like nothing. Another thing that also I think contributed to that is my dad. Like I said, he wasn't abusive, but things that he said to me broke down my self-esteem. You would maybe say, at the time when I was younger, when I was still quite overweight, he would say something like, you mustn't eat so much, you're just going to get fatter. And so those sort of comments, obviously as a kid, it's like, it's really, really bad. You only really realize how bad it is later, where when you're younger, it's like obviously the family or whatever, it's just like, oh man, whatever. I was really on the verge of becoming bulimic. I did do it like a few times, but thank goodness, then me and my boyfriend, we got back together. I just felt at the time, I said to him, I'm just too messy at the moment. Like I can't be good for you. But then, we spoke again and we saw each other. And I think at the time he was very understanding and sweet. And so we started dating again and things became good with us. I started adjusting again to life. So that didn't actually go into something bad, thank goodness, because I know once you like really in it, it's a bigger struggle going forward.
Yeah.
Like I said, music was always there, but I was about 24 when I decided I want to do music full time. The passion and the fire, just with what my husband was doing then, my ex now at the time, I couldn't really live myself and be myself. I was more supporting what he was doing. So we moved to Jeffreys Bay and we lived there for 2.5 years. But I just kept feeling this like urge in me that it's like, I have to. Like I will go crazy if I don't pursue music.
Wow.
I started writing, I started networking, like Facebook became big, and I just started like befriending musos everywhere that I can see and just talking to people and getting advice. And I started writing. I got my own home set up there and I just started writing again. Before that, I was very involved in church. So I was doing a lot of singing in church, worship leading and that sort of thing. So I really consider that time also a very much of a prep time for me going into music full time, because you get to sing in front of people, and also it's a very passionate environment. So that was really good. But then when I was about 27, it was about 2 years before that, but that's also when I started realizing with my marriage that I'm changing a lot, and the direction that I want to go in is not necessarily what he wants to do. And like I said, I was supporting him in what he was doing, but I only really realized I got married at 21. So I only really realized like more who I am becoming at a later stage. And that, I guess, is the risk of getting married so young. It really does work for some people, but it also it can be risky. So then obviously that was a tough, very tough time in my life to get divorced. It was nothing bad between us. He's a great, very great guy. It was just more, we just realized that it's probably not going to be a fit, and we're not going to be able to support each other the way that we want to going forward in life.
I love that you touched on that, because not a lot of people actually talk about the fact that it's quite difficult, especially I am not married and I've never been married and I haven't been in a lot of long-term relationships, but if I had to be in a committed relationship in my early 20s and go through all of those changes, getting to know yourself, discovering who you are, who you want to be, what direction your life has to go in, that I would not have wanted that at all. But I can only look back now and see that. So if you had to grow with someone, go through all of that with someone, I think it's really okay to start the narrative that sometimes it's all right, because the beauty and the accomplishment and everything good about a relationship is not always tied to the length, to the longevity. It was there for a purpose, and it could have been the best relationship, and it's okay to figure out who you guys are, and in a mature, loving way, with nothing wrong, no blow up, not this idea that we have of divorce being something bad and something must have happened, someone must have cheated, someone must have done something. Just saying, you know what, for us and our lives, we're not happy, we're not fulfilled, this is not our destiny, so we're going our separate ways and supporting each other in that way. Is that how you felt? Because it feels like the narrative is moving in that direction more.
I was the one that realized it more at the time. I think now, like, how long is it? 7, 8 years later, I think, but even before that, but I think he's also much more understanding of the fact that it was the right decision. I think that sometimes what might happen is that one person might see it earlier than the other. So it's never easy. I don't think, even in our better circumstance, it's not easy. I was still like crying myself to sleep at night sometimes, because I didn't want to hurt him. Like, and it's not just him; it's the whole family.
It's a whole life.
Yeah, it's a life, and he's a great person, and I will never regret being married to him. And I've learned so much about life and relationships and what I want and what I don't want in a relationship and in somebody. And I've made mistakes and I've learned from them. It's just, all in all, no, it wasn't regrets. And like with anything, there comes good stuff and bad stuff with life. And the best thing is obviously if you can walk away learning a lot. Not long after that, I decided to move to Pretoria. This was a good time for just doing life and finding myself. This is obviously also where my career started taking off a lot more.
With that mindset of getting divorced, moving to a new city, completely away from everything you knew, getting back to the discipline that you mentioned earlier, it's not just like walking in with a degree and saying, hi, I want to be an accountant if you want to become a muso, especially in South Africa. It's not an easy thing. You make it sound really light and just like part of your journey, but I understand that it's like, it takes hard work. It takes a lot of knocks, failures, no's, reinventing yourself. Tell me a bit about the mindset that you had at that time, because you gotta be a strong woman to just move and say, I'm going to become a singer. I'm going to become a songwriter. This is who I'm going to be now. What triggered that in you?
I know I always had my mom and my brother's support. My dad passed away when I was 24. So that's why I'm saying it's like my mom and my brother, they were always there for me. And my mom, it was very tough for my mom when I moved, but I think she realized that it's, I have to do it. So that was the one part of it, knowing that I have to do it. Also scary, but important in life. I knew that it was going to teach me a lot and I was going to learn a lot of life experience. In the music side, obviously important to be that side, because I already, for 2 years, I was traveling up there. I've made some connections. I knew I had some venues that I could play. So I knew that I was going to have to like be a hard gigging musician on that side, for me to even start thinking about I can build a career with my own music and like become like my own brand and name. I can already now say that it was a really, really good decision. That was kind of the mindset for me to really start my solo career on that side of the world.
You said that you started networking. Now I'm thinking like, anyone listening, networking is very important in any career that you go into. But you kind of built up a network before you went there. You kind of had your idea before you went there. How did you start communicating and building up that network?
John Savage played a big part in that time, because he had a lot of time for me just asking questions and him maybe hooking me up with other people and producers and that sort of thing. So I did an independent album at that time. I was about 25, 26. And that experience was good because I learned a lot from recording, songwriting, arranging songs and being in studio. And that's kind of where things started for my career as a solo artist, also putting my music out there and sending it to radio stations, even if I didn't think maybe nothing was going to come from it. But there was a few songs from that album that got radio play and that got a few number ones and that sort of thing, which is nice. But it was more just gaining experience in the industry. And so a lot of those contacts obviously stuck and we kind of stayed in touch and then meeting new people from that. Obviously also touring. I met some people playing at venues, other artists, venue owners. I stayed in contact with people and I tried to keep my connections good, try to be professional and obviously always keeping my standards high, like rehearsing, having good sound where we gig. Also playing with other musicians always was a very fulfilling, like asking, like, I don't know if you know Rowan Ash, but we used to gig. We used to gig together a lot before everything blew up. Yeah, so we used to play at Pizza Vino together, all sorts of venues. And then other musicians, I would pull other guys in and we would just...
It's just better collaborating, isn't it? It's so nice if you just get into that whole thing of it's not you fighting against the other people for a spot in the industry, where it's collaboration, working together, creating together. That makes a completely different vibe about you. Were there any times where you had moments of rejection, moments where you had to stay in your integrity, because the music industry can try and put you in a box sometimes and you don't seem like you've conformed. You seem very authentic from beginning to end. You learn and you grow and you refine, but there's an authenticity about you that I think some musicians definitely leave for the money and for the mainstream music and for all of those types of things. Were there instances when you were caught and kind of expected to change who Janie is, how she sounds, what she writes about?
There was times when people wanted to offer me record deals from bigger labels. Some of them were Afrikaans, some of them weren't necessarily, but I didn't feel right about it. I played them some of my songs and even if they were good, it wasn't going to matter. They had like, like there's this artist manufacturing thing, and it's still a thing in Afrikaans music. It's getting a bit better. I was a very big like punk fan when I was younger, and that taught me a lot about staying like authentic and not selling out in a sense that you losing yourself. One thing that I will say that I will always say to people is that I've always followed my gut. It's always been very important for me to keep in tune with my inner self when it comes to my career and who I am. Even if I wasn't exactly sure how my music was going to turn out eventually, I know inside what's going to feel wrong. And that's something that I would definitely say to people. You really have to trust that voice and really learn to hear it properly, because you can obviously make decisions that can just hurt you in the future, and you will just end up not being so happy because you didn't necessarily listen to it. So there was times when, I could have been signed to this major label, but I knew what it was going to end up being. And I've seen it in other people that I know personally now, where they've gone through it and it wasn't necessarily what they wanted. And they ended up at times just not being happy in life. A lot of people always commented on my sound, that it's different. It's not the usual sound that, more conservative, silky sound. Because I always listen to what's going on in the rest of the world. It's not, I don't just focus on one thing, and I don't just focus on one sound. If one song needs a certain kind of production, then I'll do that. Or if it's only a vocal and a piano, if that's what's going to be best for the song, I don't just want to conform or just be one thing or one. And that can be tough for a label to sell, because I don't want to be in a box, because I feel that will in the long run it will box me in. I won't be able to be that free with what I want to do.
And that creative, it does stifle that. Absolutely.
Definitely. But luckily there's artists like, I would say, Katy Perry and Lady Gaga in the pop world that changed that, where they also did different things at different times that felt right to them. And they were also like big creative thinkers, not just in their music, but their looks and live, when they perform live, like putting up a stage, like they just really want to be very open to what they do. I don't necessarily agree with everything that they've done, but just like keeping yourself open to possibilities within your moral standings and all of that, I think is a good thing.
And you've been quite successful there. But I love it because I get it now. It's because you're so open to change and you're so very adaptive. And I think it's beautiful. I love growing with an artist. You can see them going from teenagers to young adults to getting into relationships to going through breakups to getting married, having kids, or whatever their story is. And you kind of grow with it, and their music grows too. And I love that because every part of your life will have different music, will have different feelings, will have different instruments and lyrics, because that's who you are then, and being open to changing in that way. And your latest album that came out in the middle of our little pandemic in 2020. Tell us about that, because it's so pure and it's so stripped down and it's so beautiful. So I'd love for you to tell our audience a bit more about that.
Obviously, I've had a few singles that I released like last year, and prior to that, a few Afrikaans songs that did quite well. And the idea was for this year, we were talking about it in like January, February, that I was going to release a full production album with new songs, like really like this is now going to be this Afrikaans album that's just really going to be me and be able to portray what I want to do and a vision and that sort of thing. But then the pandemic hit and we couldn't go out, we couldn't go to studios, and it was just going to be hard to do something, but we also don't want to lose momentum. So what do we do? Because the momentum was really, really good in the beginning of this year, especially also with the release of Deal All with Early B. Yeah. Just before lockdown, I released, or not released, I started working on a song called Jammer, and that was a single that we could release then just in the beginning of the lockdown, which was good. And it also was really thankful that it for the reception, that it got. But then it was like, what do we do now? We like really want to release something for people to listen to. And so I said to my label, I think maybe what we should do is, because I've played a lot of acoustic shows and people also know me like that, like especially fans from way back, what people are listening to at the moment at their houses is definitely more chilled out music. We looked at the stats and, so people didn't like party at their houses as much as they were just chilling. And I said to them, I think maybe we should take like a few songs, maybe like 5 of the singles that I've released that did well, and just put them into like acoustic vibe, then maybe like 2 covers and 1 new song. And so it's a short album. It's like almost on the verge of it being an EP, but it's kind of like right there in between EP album. So we just really wanted to be able to release something for people to listen to. It's just kind of like an interim album. It was never meant to be like this big, like, wow. It was just like, here's something for you guys to keep you busy while we just trying to figure out life and, like this crazy time. At least there's something for you guys to listen to.
Well, that was definitely a good thing that came out of COVID, because it's a beautiful album. I've listened to it so much. It's on my playlist as well. And what is a good thing that came out of 2020 for you, except just this album? Because so many of us focus on all the negatives, myself included. I can really get into a little rant about 2020 and all my plans that I had and everything that I wanted this year to be, and it wasn't. But I've noticed that if we can get into the narrative of actually looking at what were the positive things that happened in 2020, it can really show you, yes, we live on a polarity planet. It's always going to be cold and hot, good and bad, etc., but you can choose your focus. So what is a good thing that came out of 2020 for you?
I think something that really is good is learning about pivoting, because thinking about how life can actually change the whole time. This was obviously a big one for pretty much anybody that's conscious in this world. It was a bad time. But there's definitely always things to learn about it. I didn't have necessarily the creativity in me like I used to, but it was also actually a time when my boyfriend and I could spend some good time, some good learning time together. I was able to like just learn more about life and I guess strengthening myself in ways, also like listening to podcasts and like a lot of mental learning, like about what if this happens, how can we handle it? And there was a time, it was like a week that I took where I was just like feeling a bit sorry for myself because of all the plans and all these major stages that we were going to play and that sort of thing. It's every time I feel like that though, well, there's people that's a lot worse off than myself. Spending time with my family was amazing again, because I haven't been living with, close to them for 6 years. I was able to see them on travels, but it's different when you're actually close. I could spend time with my brother's daughter, being an aunt and close to her was also, it's just been such a blessing. So there was definitely a lot of good, like I say, just learning life again, just slowing down a bit and just appreciating, just getting down to basics and just really realizing again, you don't need that much. And my love for sustainability and sustainable fashion and, all of these things was just ignited even more again in my heart. Yeah, just getting back to real. I think that was a very good thing for me.
That's beautiful.
Even with my album and everything, just getting back to real was just really good.
Yeah, I love that. In regards to your health and your wellness, because you're glowing, you look radiant. What do you do now to take care of your health and your wellness?
I've always been good with keeping my exercise up during the years. That's never changed. Even in the times when we are in the music industry and you maybe have 1 or 2 few drinks, like I was still generally always very healthy. It's tough to eat on the road. It's tough to eat healthy on the road, but there's always an option. There's always a healthier option or a way to do it a bit more healthy. Last year in November, I stopped eating meat. So for me, I feel like that's made a big difference. So like I say, I exercise. I still try and eat well. I try and be mindful about what I put in my body. I try and do also more breathing exercises and stretching, and trying to look after my skin as well as I can. Being mindful and trying to remind myself to drink enough water.
Yeah.
Being in Cape Town for me has been harder because it's a lot cold and just don't feel like drinking as much water as I would in Pretoria. But I think all in all, with the pandemic, being in lockdown and all of that, I think I kept a good balance.
That's
still.
perfect. Yeah. And it's really about working with what you've got and where you are. I also like that. I don't think your health and your wellness and how you approach it is going to stay the same the whole time. It's going to fluctuate from your budget to where you're living to your environment. Everything is going to determine, but you've just got to make sure that you pick the things that work the best for you. And you got to get to know your body so well, like you have over these past couple of years since you were 15, 16, getting to know your body, knowing what works for you, and just sticking to the basics. Just understanding the basics is so crucial. People don't talk about that enough. No fads, no weird stuff. The basics can get you through even a pandemic.
Definitely. No, the fads, just be consistent. And if you can be consistent, exercising even 3 or 4 times a week, doing something is better than nothing. If you can do 5 minutes of something
really,
in a day,
it makes a difference.
Your body wants to move. So just anything that you can do to make a bit of extra time. And then obviously don't be too hard on yourself if you don't get something right, or if you maybe fall off the horse. Like I still eat like dark chocolate. I'll have every now and then I'll eat a pizza. Like it really is just if you want to feel good, just be balanced. I think that is definitely the best way to go.
And I think what I love about your story, especially hearing how you grew up and how it was eating then compared to now, it's really just not eating a pizza every day. From going from having a chocolate every day to having one once in a while. But it's really, it sounds so cliche, but it is being consistent, having a balance, and then just not being hard on yourself. It's a journey. It's not a destination.
Exactly. It's a journey, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's just important. There's self-discipline and self-motivation that comes into play here, because like you say, you can't just do these and eat these things every day. And then the other side, you can't also exercise yourself to death. You can't. Exactly. You have to balance all of it really well. And it's very important to try and listen to your own body. Like you also, like saying, it sounds cliche, but when you over time really learn to listen to your body and what it needs and what it wants, you reap the benefits. Definitely. It makes such a difference.
And it gets easier.
It definitely. Like in the beginning, it's like, but how do you listen to your body? How does it talk to you? But
how does it work? But really, if you just keep doing it, just tuning in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like little things. If you feel like something feels funny, like I feel like my stomach feels weird. If that's like the first thing that you feel, then it's like, okay, well, I know that drinking water is good, and that's always a good place to start. Like my body is literally, it's gotten to a place where it feels like my body is saying like to me, greens. And then I'm like, okay, for the next few days, I must focus on eating greens. And that's the thing. As you carry on, it's such an amazing journey where you can actually,
it is
even like waking up, it's like, whoa, I feel like a lot more tired today. Why is that? What did I do?
I wonder why.
What did I do yesterday? What did I eat? How's my sinuses feeling? Like just really tuning in.
I'm so excited. I always love asking our guests this question. What is the one thing that you can advise to our listeners that they do to live their everyday lives better?
It's not just about your own life. You have people around you, and what you do can also influence the way that you live, can influence other people, and you can have influence. And so be an example to other people. You can help other people from your own experience and the things that you've maybe gone through where you weren't as healthy and now you are. To have an ultimate understanding and empathy towards other people, whether you really know them or not. You don't always know their circumstances, and you don't always know what they've been through. It's a tough thing sometimes, and we feel like you want to judge people and you don't understand. It's like, I don't understand why they're acting this way. I don't understand why they're making these decisions. But if you have been through a lot in your life, you can be of a lot of help to somebody else if you can be understanding.
Yes, definitely. I love it. And I just want to take a moment to just acknowledge you for the work you've done, for the work you've done on yourself, for how you've grown and how you've shared that with the world. It's an amazing gift that you have. And thank you for nurturing it. And thank you for making us feel better with your music. And thank you for being authentic and showing people that you can go through life and you can go through things from childhood to marriage and divorce and starting in a new city with no way of knowing what's going to happen, but just having that courage and being an example for us. So thank you for being you and being authentic through all of this. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your time today. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much thank you so much for having me. It was very pleasant, and thanks for what you do as well, for doing this podcast, and thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to share your takeaway or something you heard that motivated or inspired you, we would love it if you would subscribe to our channel, leave a review, and tag @TheLifeKraft on Instagram. Also, feel free to let us know who you'd like to see appear on this show in future. We enjoy bringing you interviews from experts and everyday people so that they can talk about their experiences and share information, tips, and what has worked for them on their journey towards a better life. However, remember that the opinions or advice of our guests and myself, the host, should not be taken as personal, actionable advice and is given as general information and education only. Please always remember to consult a qualified professional before implementing any medical, financial, legal, or other advice that you believe might work for you. LifeKraft is not responsible nor liable for your decision when implementing anything you hear on the podcast. Please listen and act responsibly. The opinions of our guests do not represent the opinions or views of LifeKraft or Melissa Lane personally and are meant as information and general education only.